In terms of engagement technologies for speakers and content, you know, right now what we see are the three main areas are your ARS keypad types of technologies, your basic ARS, you have your mobile applications out there, which include, you know, meeting apps and texting apps, and then you have your second screen technologies, which are full slide sharing. So whatever technology you're using, you know, there's always going to be an initial kind of excitement and a wow when your participants come to your event and they either sit down at an iPad or they pull open the application for the first time. And, you know, it tells your attendees that it's going to be an interesting, innovating, involved, or exciting experience, something new, something a little bit different. But, you know, there's just that initial bump, and it's just really from there, it's up to you to bring in the value for this, to make sure that they actually utilize it. And there's a lot of tools and techniques and best practices for increasing content engagement and collecting meaningful data. Educating your speakers and on your events team, these options and encouraging them to embrace them can truly transform your events and ensure measurable success. So one of the deployment techniques you've just experienced, and we always recommend including a pre-survey or a gateway survey. And these are to be completed on the devices before the session even starts. And you don't want to do more than 3 to 5 questions. You don't want to overwhelm people with too much to do. But a lot of times people are walking into the meeting space. They're sitting down with a cup of coffee, they're checking text messages, they're having a kind of a conversation. Why not go ahead and get their minds thinking about what they're going to be learning about today, what they're interested in. So if you ask these 3 to 5 questions, you're going to be able to benchmark your meeting impact. So ask questions about their current knowledge level, relevant skills, opinions, confidence or competence in things, additional demographics which may not have been collected in the registration data, and also maybe what meeting topics they really want to hear the most about. I've seen this successfully deployed where they actually dictate what sessions happened in the afternoon based on these questions that were done in a pre-survey at the beginning of the meeting. And one of the other things about this is you can take the results of any specific question and include it in the presentation at any point, like we just did with which technology does everybody use. That was a pre-survey question. We incorporated it right into the discussion. So you can take these benchmarks and make them a point of discussion in a presentation. So one of the other things that you should do to ensure success with technology is take that housekeeping time like we did today. Make sure you take at least 2 minutes to review the key features and walk through them. Show a visual of them up on the big screen so that everybody in the room can see what you're talking about. You want to address those key features for your technology. They're going to be utilized to ensure success. For today, we're talking about that login process, the fact that there's a pre-survey to answer the questions, please. And then you want to notate that there's an ask a question button, taking notes, just like I did, walk you through those processes so you're aware that they are there. And also, please answer the evaluations when they pop up on the devices. And finally, in the housekeeping, you want to make sure that you address the fact that there will be polling questions popping up on the devices. And an icebreaker polling question is a really great way to let the participants know that this technology is really working from the very beginning and that their voices will be heard throughout the event. And possibly even with a little chuckle. So it's a great way to get that ice broken. And this is the first time you can start to see the phones going down or being put away instead of being the item that's in their hands. This is when they want to be a part of the conversation as a group. And you want to make these topics potentially, and these are just suggestions, but I've seen these done very successfully. Make it trivia. It could be about a speaker or an executive. It can be general humor. It can be trivia about the city, the venue, or even current events. So for today's icebreaker poll, I'm going to ask you a question. A group of unicorns are known as a what? And everybody can tap their screen if they're on the interactive technology. This is normally where I'd be humming Jeopardy music, but I am not a good singer. I will spare you. It looks like most of the people have responded. So So the correct answer is actually a blessing. So most people got this incorrect, and as you can see, it's highlighted here on the graph. So it's a fun question, got you chuckling, and now we can move on, and you understand that this technology is going to work for this demo. So why include polling? Without participants' authentic engagement, there is no learning. And for many, engagement means being heard. Everybody wants to be a part of the conversation that engages them. So these live polls give you a chance to engage every one of your delegates all at the same time and uncover viewpoints about a presented topic. And as a bonus, you're effectively pulling them into your presentation content and you're collecting meaningful data. So it's a win-win for everybody involved, and you're walking away with something meaningful on the back end of this event. So let's try another polling question. Who would win in a boxing tournament? And this shows that we can actually put images as a way to stimulate and engage. And most of you got this one correct, 74%, because Ms. Piggy would, well, she studied karate and she's kind of a master of all sports. Nobody would want to mess with her. So some best practices for polling, and this comes from actually 12 years of deploying technology at events. It's good to poll at the very beginning of a presentation to help determine what people are interested in as far as an audience for that session, and also as a benchmark, as we've mentioned. And you can ask the same polling question at the end of that presentation and show a comparative graph to show the influence that your presentation has made so that the audience understands the impact that your presentation has made, and they can walk away with that understanding. It's great to poll during a presentation to re-engage the audience to make sure their voices are heard in the conversation and to kind of wake them up and keep them following along, and to make sure the questions are relevant, make sure those questions are relevant to the discussion and the participants, and always make sure your presenter addresses the results when they're up on the screen. Don't ask questions for the sake of asking questions and not touch the results, otherwise you're not really listening to them. And anytime you want to collect data about your audience, as presenters, they have the opportunity here with a captive audience to do research and study and find out about what's going on out there. So we never want more than 3 to 4 polling questions sprinkled throughout a 45-minute presentation. Otherwise, it starts to become tedious and monotonous, and people will stop participating as much. Each technology that's out there for engagement has a different set of polling question types, but it is something to think about in what types of questions you're asking, and you can be creative in how you use them. We've showed you a few today as far as with images, but you can have your single select one, you can have single select of images, you can have multi-checkbox, check all to apply, you could say check your top 3 options. You can have ranking questions where you drag and drop. You'll see that in the evaluation. You also can have open text questions. You can have matrix and sliding scales, which we're all used to seeing in evaluations. And one of the other things we can do is send out a snap poll. So you could do something that doesn't really disturb the audience, that you don't want to show the results, but you want to make sure everybody is still paying attention, just like we've done here. So feel free to answer that. But we wouldn't even mention that during the presentation. So another fun thing we can do is gamification. Everybody loves to compete, so why not make it something in your event, in your presentations? Breaks up the monotony of the boring content, and you can wake up an audience after a post-lunch food coma. You can compete as individuals or teams. You can have self-paced games. There's a lot of different options out there. But it's great to make it something very exciting that people can see as a competitive nature. Some of the best practices that I've seen is that you spread questions throughout the day as an ongoing contest, and use something that's going to wake them up and let them know it's time to actually play a game. If possible, offer a fun prize subject to regulation. I know that there's a lot of regulation around this in some industries, but do something that's going to, get them excited and make sounds, we use a wheel of knowledge. And so this is going to determine a category that's going to come up for your polling question. And from here, we pop up the question, and that gets everybody just really excited. So one more question for you today. What is the most valuable sports franchise in the world? Go ahead and answer now. Okay, looks like everybody answered. The correct answer, only 4% got it correct, is the Dallas Cowboys. They have now surpassed and are the most valuable sports franchise in the world. Now, educating every day. So the great thing about this is we can also, you weren't aware of this, but you were all competing against each other at home. So today we can actually look at, and this is on the webinar portion only, but we can see the leaderboard. So if you pop over to the webinar for a second, you can see the leaderboard of the remote attendees who got the most correct. I didn't want to butcher the name. It's G.S. Shage, but I did anyway. Okay. So another great feature is the ability to ask a question, and this is really one of the strongest features for engagement. This feature gives everyone a voice. Participants should be encouraged to ask questions throughout with the Q&A button, and the questions should be sent to a queue that is being managed by the events team or moderator. Every client is different. There's no set way to do this. So based on whatever your technology is and configuration, there are various ways to do this, but you want to be able to potentially filter these questions and monitor these on a real-time basis. You could have them being fed to the speaker. You could have them being fed to a moderator in the audience, getting them on a tablet. But what this does over microphones using digital Q&A, you're going to give your shyest of attendees a voice, and they can ask questions whenever they think of them. You're going to get questions coming in on content at the beginning of the session instead of waiting till the very end and being brave enough to get up to a microphone. You're going to be able to identify those hot topic issues because those questions are coming in over and over from different people. You don't want your audience leaving with most of them having the same question about a topic and no one was brave enough to get up and ask it. Here you're able to identify and ensure that it's addressed. You can choose from a large pool of questions and address just the very best ones, and you can follow up on any unanswered relevant questions directly with the participant because it's all being recorded within the system. So here's some best practices for digital Q&A. It's really all about that very first session. And this is where I've always seen it make or break technology at a meeting. When you get to that end of that first session, you want to ensure that your presenter or moderator who's looking at the queue of questions says something that acknowledges the source of the question. And you want to make sure that you acknowledge that the question came from technology. Let's see what questions were submitted through the technology. That's a simple statement, but it lets the audience know that's the priority method for questions to come in, and that their voices can be heard through the system. So that shows them it works, their questions are not going into a black hole, and from that point on, as long as you continue to make the technology the priority for where questions come from, you will get many, many more questions that way. You also want to make sure that you ensure that each presenter has allotted time to answer submitted questions. So make sure you build that into your budgeted time. Make sure that the moderator presenters are continuously reminding the audience to submit questions. And you could consider this, and I know it's a really strange concept, get rid of the microphone altogether. It's amazing to me as organizers of meetings that every moment is accounted for, everything is planned, every piece of content is approved, every detail is taken care of. And then you have this window where you hand the microphone over to anybody who wants to say anything they want to everybody in your audience. And sometimes that can be wrong. Sometimes that can be intrusive. It can be aggressive. It can be the same person who gets up over and over, that microphone hog. And eventually that ends up being the last thing that everyone hears as they're leaving the room or even leaving the event. It can leave a bad taste in everyone's mouth, so why not take that and take control of Q&A and have something to show for it afterwards. And finally, you want to avoid that dead silence. Are there any questions and no one has asked any questions? It kind of sounds like your content didn't make an impact and no one took anything away. You can pre-plant questions into the system. They can also be pre-planted questions that you didn't want to directly reveal were in the presentation, but it's a great way to get a conversation going. So just to show you that, we can look at questions coming in real time from you. How do you recommend training presenters on this type of technology? Well, you can do webinars like this, and we do offer that with our services as well. So we're happy to provide that, or we have some best practices overviews as well on how to include polling questions, depending on the technology, but that's just how we do it here at Educational Measures. So surveys, evaluations, and feedback forms. So it's really being able to have forms and collect information from people. So you want to be able to collect your data electronically. Obviously, that beats paper any day of the week for anyone involved here who has to do paper, who's ever had to do paper management of evaluations. Digital is always the way to go by far. So, there's a couple different things that you can do to ensure effectiveness. You can deploy session evaluations a few minutes before the end of each presentation. And session evaluations just relate to the content that was just heard, or you can send it out even during Q&A on the technology, but you want to make sure you can push it out to maximize the number of completions. And it also gets everyone's true, honest, fresh feedback right after they've heard the content. That's that short window of opportunity to collect that feedback from stuff they've just heard. Everybody has an opinion. If they put them to sleep, they're willing to tell you that, but you have a very short period of time for them to tell you. It's not going to be at the end of the day. And ask only 3 to 4 questions in these session evaluations to ensure the highest levels of participation. Make them very quick and simple. Ask direct feedback questions that relate to specific content. Don't always standardize the same 3 questions. The speaker was affected, that sort of thing. Make it relate to the actual content to see if you moved the needle in that session, if they took away what they were supposed to take away. And then you have a separate event evaluation that you can push out as a button, as you can see on in any technology, and that can be something they can complete at the end of the event when it's pushed out, or it can be accessed at any time through the button. But really, the most effective way is that session evaluation. Have it pop up, build it into the presentation. So you can go ahead and start to fill this out. This is actually already included in the overall event evaluation, so you don't need to fill this out right now, but this would be the best way to collect your feedback. So virtual and hybrid meetings. So we talk about those virtual meetings where you have remote participants. You're experiencing that right now with technology, and a different technology. You've probably not used the Educational Measures Array system before in this capacity. So this is a virtual meeting being used on engagement technology. So how is this experience for you? How is it different? But when we talk about hybrid meetings, that's where you have an audience in a live space as well as a remote audience who are watching through a web browser. What you want to do is duplicate the interactive features so that the people who are in the remote audience are able to interact with the same features. Allow them to interact with the polls and ensure that those surveys are being pushed out to them. Allow them to ask questions and allow them to compete in the games at the same time. And when you answer those questions that have come in from the remote audience, make sure that the speaker says, and here's a question that came in from the remote audience, or even address the actual individual by name. So it's a great way to engage that remote audience, let them know that they're not just sitting as a bystander, they're actively involved as if they're sitting in the room. So at this point, that's most of the features and feature set. I welcome any questions at this point, and I'm happy to look through the ones we've received at this point to answer some of those.
Chuck, it looks like we have a really great one on what's the difference in the tech usage and engagement between large and small events.
Yeah, so one of the big differences I see is that with the smaller events, the technology is used more for collecting data to ensure you get something from every person. A lot of times smaller events are like advisory boards where you're going to you really want them to have more of a dialogue. So you're not going to use the Q&A feature as much. You want them to ask the questions to each other. So yes, it's less of the Q&A, but you can do more of the forums and use those as a way to complete exercises and group collaboration, that type of thing. So you can use them in different ways. And so that would be one of the big differences, in where you have the larger groups, you want to use more of these features. And I would say for the smaller groups, you still want to do some of the pollings, but you use them as discussion points. But again, smaller groups, a lot of times you have a scribe in the back of the room who's trying to write down everything that's being said, because it is a more verbal type of group. And this is a great way to document it. Again, pushing out forms to have this group exercise and group collaboration is a great way to document what's being discussed and the key points, and it ensures that you're getting something from everybody in the room, not just a few key people who may take over a conversation.
Okay, thank you. We have another one. Do you offer speaker training to improve presenter skills, or maybe service to improve usage of technology?
We do not necessarily have speaker training to improve presenter skills. I do actually know of another group that does that specifically, and actually has a pretty cool technology that monitors movement, the way you move and discuss and present. So I can refer you to that. But as far as to improve the usage of technology, we can advise that. Our technicians actually are pretty well versed at some of these best practices as well, and your program managers can offer potentially even training webinars, which I've done in the past as well.
Excellent, thank you.
There's a question here about how do attendees get their notes. Even from today, if you've taken notes or saved these slides, you're going to get an email the next day that's going to allow you to download your saved slides and notes. It'll come down as a single PDF from an email.
Okay. Any more questions? We'd be happy to take any more before we conclude. Again, we will be sending out the presentation slides within the next week, as well as providing an on-demand version of this webinar that you can share with your colleagues that aren't able to make it today. Any other questions, Chuck, that you see that haven't been answered?
No, I think they've all been answered, and I really appreciate everyone's time and attention and for playing along with the games. And sorry about the surprise competition, but that's the way it is. So I'm glad you were engaged.
Wait, Chuck, we have one more. Sorry about that. He said he was typing a question, and then the feedback form came up, so he wants to ask it now.
Okay.
Go ahead. I don't hear him. The question was from James Miller. James, do you have a question that you'd like to submit? Okay, I don't see it from him, so maybe he dropped off beforehand. So James, if you'd like to submit your question after the fact, we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. All right.
Absolutely.
Okay, and same goes for everybody. Please feel free to follow up with us for any questions that you may have. We really appreciate everyone's time participating today, and thank you so much. We appreciate it. Hopefully you can join us for the next session in this series that is taking place next month in July. You can go back to that original webpage to register if you haven't already. With that, we're going to be focusing on planning and implementing virtual and hybrid meetings from start to finish. Thank you so much for everyone's time today, and talk to you later. All right.
Thank you, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.